Welcome back, Defenders. We've got more information about those North Korean soldiers on their way to Ukraine to fight for the Russians. Specifically, how many? Ukraine claims Russia is preparing 10,000 North Korean soldiers in the Far East for deployment to Ukraine. This is not about improving the combat capability of the Russians. This is about optics, and it's about money. And we can just think about it. Who is paying these North Korean soldiers? And of course, it's Putin and the Russians. But who's receiving the payment? It's not the North Korean soldiers. It's not their families back in North Korea. It's the Kim regime. So Kim Jong-un sent about 10,000 of his slaves to go participate in this war, and they have to be paid at least what Putin is paying regular contract soldiers. So 10,000 soldiers times about 2,000 US dollars a month, that's about $20 million a month. To Vladimir Putin, that's not a lot of money. But to Kim Jong-un, that's a lot of Hennessy cognac and Kobe steaks. For $20 million a month, Kim is willing to let go of his worst of the worst. 10,000 soldiers he doesn't care about. I guarantee you he's not sending special forces or troops he actually cares about. This is a one-way ticket for these North Korean men. According to the Institute for the Study of War, North Korean military aid could allow Putin to avoid mobilization. Once again, no it doesn't. Just think about it. On the battlefield per day, killed, wounded, and captured, Russia is losing about 1,000 soldiers a day. So for the North Koreans to send 10,000, that extends the war for Putin by 10 days. This is not going to be a significant difference on the battlefield. It's about the optics, and it's about Kim Jong-un making some money. And the quality of North Korean soldiers is so bad, I have to explain to you the concept of Juche. This is the more or less religion of North Korea. Juche posits that a country will prosper once it has become self-reliant by achieving political, economic, and military independence. The North Koreans don't identify as communist because Kim Il-sung is the founder of their nation, he's their eternal god, Kim Jong-un is his grandson, he's the current living god. And they're not allowed to talk about Karl Marx, who was German, or Lenin, who was Russian, because those people aren't related to Kim Il-sung. So they invented their own deviation of Marxist Leninism, and this is just an excuse for being impoverished. Juche says, don't ask the government for anything. The government doesn't owe you anything because the only way the government and the people can prosper is if you figure it out on your own. So Juche demands that North Korean soldiers get their own everything, including food. I'm not kidding here. North Korean soldiers are in charge of farming for their own food, of foraging for their own food. They're not given rations by their military command. Why doesn't North Korea have enough food this year? This article is from 2021. North Korea, every year, consistently struggles to feed their people, to avoid famine and starvation. These North Korean soldiers, I guarantee, are not elite forces of the children of the ruling elite in Pyongyang. They're from this dark area. This is the satellite picture of North Korea at night. And these men who are being sent to Russia to go fight in Ukraine, they've never had indoor plumbing. They've never had consistent electricity. They've never seen a smartphone. They don't know what the internet is. These are the most backwards and brainwashed people in the world. I'm not saying that as a criticism. These people are victims. North Korea is an open-air prison camp. Every person living in North Korea is a prisoner of the Kim regime. These people are victims. If you want to learn more about North Korea, I can recommend this TED Talk, The Family I Lost in North Korea and the Family I Gained by Joseph Kim. I'll link this down below. I also recommend the book Escape from Camp 14 by Blaine Harden. North Korea has a 3-generation purge policy. If you do anything to upset the Kim regime, everyone in your family tree on your level goes to a concentration camp, but everyone the generation above you and the generation below you also goes to a political concentration camp. So the man in this book was born in a concentration camp. He managed to escape, and then he escaped North Korea. He's the only North Korean that we know of who has successfully done that, based on guards at the camp who have defected. Everything he says is more or less accurate. If you want to know why the Kim regime just won't collapse, I recommend this book, The Real North Korea by Andrei Lankoff. 3 months ago when I was talking about this, I didn't say Russia wouldn't do it. I said it would be stupid for Russia to do it, to try to deploy North Korean soldiers to the war zone Ukraine. But Putin is desperate, the Russians are desperate, and sure enough, North Korean troops are deserting the Ukraine front line days after arrival. Russia is searching for 18 North Korean deserters near Ukraine's border. These people are survivalists. Their entire lives, they've been camping out in the woods, eating tree bark and grass, eating bugs to survive. So for them to get loose somewhere on the Ukrainian-Russian border, these guys don't care if it's cold, they don't care if it's dark, they don't care if they don't have food. That's what they've been used to their entire lives. So I don't think these troops are going to make a difference, but it's about shaping the narrative. Why now? Why didn't Kim Jong-un send troops to Ukraine a year ago? Why didn't he send them 3 months ago? And it's about the election here in the United States. The North Koreans are deliberately causing a provocation to shape the political dialogue here in the United States. Pyongyang claims 1.4 million youths enlist as tensions flare with Seoul. There's no tensions flaring with Seoul. South Korea hasn't done anything to cause this provocation 3 weeks prior to the US election. And this number of 1.4 million, the North Koreans embellish and lie about absolutely everything. For 1.4 million youths to sign up for the military this week, there's only about 13 million guys in the entire country. That would be 10% of their male population who wasn't in the military choosing to join the military this week because something. Why? There's no reason. North Korea already has on paper the largest military in the world. Kim Jong-un deliberately keeps all men of able-bodied age in the military for most of their lives to stop them from revolting, to stop them from rising up and killing the Kim family. So why now? North Korea blows up a road and rail links with hostile state South Korea. I told you guys weeks ago, and I said it 2 days ago, North Korea is doing this to help Donald Trump win the election. This is about shaping the narrative that World War III is imminent, and only the peace candidate, Donald Trump, can save us. What Kim Jong-un wants is sanctions lifted on North Korea so that he can engage more freely in criminal activity. Donald Trump more or less has promised to do this if he's reelected. When asked, what is your opinion on sanctions on Belarus, sanctions on Russia, sanctions on China, sanctions on North Korea, Donald Trump says he's not a fan of sanctions. Donald Trump also professed his love. He stated that Kim Jong-un wrote him beautiful letters, and these two men are now in love with each other. So yeah, this is collaboration with a hostile regime. And of course, Donald Trump is playing his part. Within a day of North Korea blowing up these roads and rail bridges connecting to South Korea, Donald Trump took to social media. North Korea just blew up the railway going to South Korea. Here we go, this is bad news. Only Trump can solve it. Trump also gave an interview with Bloomberg News, and yes, he was hoping the North Koreans or the Chinese or the Russians would cause some kind of provocation, some kind of international incident, that he could then talk about and say, I'm good friends with all these people, vote for me, and I'm the only one that can prevent World War III.
I had a very good relationship with President Xi, and a very good relationship with Putin, and a very good relationship with Kim Jong-un, who has a nuclear force that you won't even believe. And by the way,
I'm friends with Putin. I'm friends with Xi of China. I'm friends with Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-un, by the way, who has amazing nuclear weapons.
Today it was announced for those that he just blew up the railroad going into South Korea. That means South Korea is now cut off from Russia and China and various other places. Cut off by rail.
Mr. Trump, you just mentioned.
No, but
Putin.
These are big things. I have to mention them.
Yeah, you just mentioned Putin, though, and there's been this controversy of the past week. Can you say yes or no whether you have talked to Vladimir Putin since you stopped being president?
Well, I don't comment on that, but I will tell you that if I did, it's a smart thing. If I'm friendly with.
So he was asked. This report in Bob Woodward's book, have you spoken to Putin 7 times since leaving office? I guarantee you Donald Trump has not spoken to any other world leader, Modi or Justin Trudeau or Macron, 7 times since leaving office. Trump has a special relationship of some kind with Vladimir Putin. To talk to him 7 times over the course of like 3 years. He then says, I don't comment on that, but if I did do it, it would be a smart thing to do. There's so many stupid things in the sentence. Prior to saying that, he declared that, oh no, the roads and rail lines have been blown up by the North Koreans. The South Koreans are cut off. There's been absolutely no road and rail traffic from South Korea through North Korea in over 70 years. This is insane. South Korea is basically an island. The DMZ is the most well, it might not be anymore, but it was the most heavily fortified border in the world. So Donald Trump continues to say stupid thing after stupid thing, and he's still going to get tens of millions of votes in 3 weeks. But all early indications are very positive for Kamala Harris. Georgia had their first day of voting yesterday or 2 days ago, and over 300,000 people voted on the first day of early voting, doubling the record that was set 4 years ago when Joe Biden won the state of Georgia by only about 10 or 11,000 votes. The early votes in Pennsylvania are also positive. The polling in North Carolina looks good. At the moment, Donald Trump should lose on November 5th if everyone who opposes Donald Trump shows up and votes. I'm very positive at the moment. Let's get to the other top story. Zelensky unveiled his 5-point victory plan to the Ukrainian parliament, from seeking NATO membership to proposing a non-nuclear deterrence package on Ukrainian soil. Zelensky's strategy outlines a path not just to end the war, but to secure Ukraine's future role. Here are the highlights of his 5 points. These 5 points did have classified or secret annexes that only specific world leaders could see. The first one is an invitation to NATO today, now. I don't think that's going to happen, but that is absolutely the correct thing for Ukraine to be setting as a goal. And this discussion should never go away. Ukraine cannot ever have peace. These wars will never end with Russia unless Ukraine becomes a member of NATO. Russia has forced this scenario. Ukraine could have survived as a neutral buffer state forever, but Russia invaded them. And on Kremlin State TV, they promised to never stop until they take everything they want to take. The city of Kharkiv, the city of Odessa, Kyiv, whatever. The second point, strengthening defense through operations in Russia, jointly shooting down Russian aircraft with partners. In effect, a no-fly zone over Ukraine. Ukraine wants Poland and Romania specifically to help shoot down Russian drones and missiles attacking Ukrainian cities. Deterrence of Russian aggression. Ukraine suggests deploying a comprehensive non-nuclear package on Ukrainian territory to deter Russia from attacking them again. strategic and economic potential of Ukraine. It provides for an agreement with partners. I'll talk more about that in a second. The post-war period, Ukrainian experience should be used for an entire alliance and the defense of Europe. Ukraine suggests replacing U.S. military in Europe with Ukrainian troops after the war. So for Trump or whoever to complain, why is the United States protecting Europe? Ukraine is saying, we'll do it. There doesn't need to be any U.S. forces, U.S. soldiers stationed anywhere in Europe. Ukraine is willing to use their troops and their bodies. I'm sure this would equate to a pay bump if these become NATO salaries and not just Ukrainian military salaries. But yeah, I think this is a deal that Ukrainian troops would gladly take. If they can achieve peace, they'll help Europe maintain it. So specifically about these annexes, Ukraine is trying to make an economic argument to the major powers. Germany, Italy, France, the UK. And they're trying to explain that if Ukraine falls to Russia, Russia will just become vastly more powerful and economically prosperous. Under Ukraine's territory, there are resources worth trillions of dollars. Resources in uranium, titanium, lithium, graphite, oil, and natural gas. If Russia takes this territory, all those deposits become Russia's. Russia will not hesitate to rip whatever they can out of the ground, sell it on the international market, make as much money as possible, use that to build up their military, and then they're going for the Baltics. They're going for Poland, they're going for Georgia, they're going for Finland. Help Ukraine win, and Ukraine can pay everyone back. We will need foreign investment to go in to extract these resources. Ukraine doesn't have their own domestic industry to get the oil and gas deposits, but Ukraine is willing to enter into long-term contracts with Western companies if their governments will save them today, basically. It's a good deal. Let me read for you Zelensky's closing argument. This is what he said after presenting his 5 points to the Ukrainian parliament. If Russia's war against Ukraine ends at a peace summit and based on international law, it will convince other potential aggressors not to start new wars. If Putin achieves his insane geopolitical, military, ideological, and economic goals, it will leave an overwhelming impression on the other potential aggressors, particularly in the Gulf region, in the Indo-Pacific, and Africa, that wars of conquest can be profitable for them as well. If Ukraine does not win this war, then the international rules-based order is gone. There will be no deterrence factor. If you're a country with nuclear weapons and you want to invade your neighbor and take their territory, Putin is now setting the precedent that you can do this. And the Western Alliance, the free and democratic world, will do nothing to stop you. The message being sent, if you want to attack your neighbor, kill them, and steal their land, all you need to do is get nuclear weapons, and the West will allow you to do it. I can't support Zelensky's whole victory plan, says NATO chief Rutte. And I think, this plan is ambitious. This is Ukraine's right to ask to join NATO, to ask for additional capabilities and help. But the Western allies, we're not united. It's each country on their own doing what they're comfortable doing. So I do want to play this clip of the NATO secretary explaining his position on Ukraine joining NATO.
Yes, in the future, NATO will have, as a 32 or 34th member, we will have Ukraine. At the moment, it seems that it will be Ukraine as number 33, but maybe somebody else pops in front of him. But Ukraine will be a member of NATO in the future. That is what we decided in Washington. So the question is then about the timeline. So then the question is exactly about the when. I cannot answer that now at this moment, but clearly we are working on all these tracks to make sure that indeed one day they will be a member of NATO. Collectively, we will do whatever is needed to make sure that Ukraine can prevail, that Putin will not get his way.
So I do believe at some point in the future, Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine will become members of NATO. If we can get a revolution in Belarus, Belarus also needs to join. It's the only way to stop Russia's imperial ambitions, stopping the Russians from trying to rebuild their empire of the 1800s. Either nukes or alliance. Zelensky raises specter of Ukraine becoming a nuclear power again. If Ukraine had kept their nukes in 1994, Russia never would have invaded them. So this is the discussion. And I've mentioned this a couple times here on the channel that Ukraine always has this option. If the West stops supporting Ukraine and the Russians continue to advance, why shouldn't Ukraine develop their own nuclear weapons and use them to defend their sovereign territory? First nuke could be ready in weeks, unnamed Ukrainian officials reportedly say. So there's a lot of confusion. There's the nuclear device, and then the delivery system. Ukraine is not building an ICBM or a Trident missile anytime soon, but they can easily build a nuclear device comparable to what the United States used on Japan in 1945. There's two kinds of fissile materials you can use. You can either use enriched uranium, which would be more costly and difficult for Ukraine to do, or you can use plutonium. And plutonium is a byproduct of civilian nuclear reactors. This is why developed countries are so reticent about allowing undeveloped countries to have nuclear power. Because if they want to use the nuclear waste from a nuclear power plant to build a plutonium bomb comparable to what the United States used in 1945, they can do that. Ukraine can do this anytime they want. They've had this opportunity the last 2.5 years and they've chosen not to. But if the West wants to whine and cry about being fatigued and they don't want to support Ukraine anymore, then they're forcing Ukraine to use this option. Now, this is not something that Zelensky or his administration wants to talk about. This is only going to upset and embolden the Russians to use nukes first to prevent Ukraine from using a nuke first. So if we want to prevent nuclear war between Ukraine and Russia, we need to be supporting Ukraine more. This is an insane argument to be making, but it's Putin and the Russians forcing us in the discussion. If, for some reason, the Russians start taking or destroying Odessa, or taking or destroying Kharkiv, or advancing on Kyiv, yeah, the Ukrainians have to use every option available to them. Let's get to some bad news for Russia. Ukraine reportedly reclaims territory in the north of the Kharkiv Oblast. Almost an entire Russian regiment was destroyed. Ukraine's Defense Intelligence put out this video, I'll link it down below, it's on YouTube, showing some of their combat operations, but apparently an entire Russian regiment was annihilated in the Kharkiv region. This is something that people just kind of forget about, but in May of this year, so almost 6 months ago, Russia invaded Kharkiv to take the city of Kharkiv. I don't know. They definitely wanted to take the city of Kupiansk. And they failed at the first stop on their path. The first goal was to take the city of Vovchansk. They managed to destroy it. Every building is now a ruin. But the Russians didn't take anything. They failed to create a buffer zone. This has been an absolute disaster. And they just want to pretend like it never happened. They're not going to talk about it ever. There's video. HIMARS strike targets Russian troops at a training ground. This was in the Zaporizhia region, and the Russians are so stupid they continue setting up training grounds within HIMARS range. So the Ukrainians HIMARS these Russian troops who are gathered for some kind of training exercise. There's two different videos. I'll link them both down below. Once again, this is about 20 or so Russians and their equipment, and they're about to be shredded by cluster munitions. Russian colonel linked to military intelligence shot dead near Moscow. Seems to be happening quite frequently that high-ranking Russian officials in Moscow keep being assassinated by somebody. Bar owner and 2 others injured in a Moscow car bomb attack. Seems to be a lot of car bombings in Moscow these days. Kind of strange. Russian officials resigned to letting ruble fall past 100 versus the US dollar. So the Russian ruble almost a year ago was at 98 rubles to 1 US dollar. This was prior to Putin's re-election, and this made Putin look bad. So he ordered the Russian central bank to just buy their own currency to keep it under this symbolic number, 100 Russian rubles to 1 US dollar. It actually looks like it strengthened through the summertime in August, but since August 4th, it's depreciated by about 15 or 20%. And the reports is that Russia's central bank isn't going to do this anymore. When they use their foreign currency reserves just to buy rubles, to mess with the price, they're basically just setting their money on fire. They're using good hard currency in Chinese yuan or whatever they can hold these days to buy their own currency, which in the coming years will just be rendered worthless. Let's get to the good news. US announces $425 million in a security aid package for Ukraine. Zelensky says package includes long-range weapons. What could those be? There is speculation that by the end of the year, Ukraine is going to get JASSMs. These can be fired from F-16s. But there's also the question, where the heck are the ATACMS? Since the Ukrainians launched their invasion into Kursk, I don't think the United States has sent Ukraine any more ATACMS for fear, concern, that Ukraine might use them on the territory of Russia without US permission. But we just need to get through our election on November 5th. There could be a delivery of ATACMS on November 6th, and then a reversal in policy. We just got to get through the next 2.5 weeks. But in this package, this is really good news. In the coming months, the United States will provide Ukraine with a range of additional capabilities, including hundreds of air defense interceptors, dozens of tactical air defense systems, additional artillery systems, significant quantities of ammunition, hundreds of armored personnel carriers and infantry fighting vehicles, and thousands of additional armored vehicles, Humvees, Bradleys, Strykers, whatever. Here's what else is in the package. It's the usual good stuff to keep Ukraine in the fight. Australia to give Ukraine another almost 50 US-made Abrams tanks. These are older variants of the Abrams, but they're ready to go. They don't need any special treatment or refurbishing. Australia can deliver these actually relatively soon. So thank you so much to the people of Australia. Final clip I have for you is from the Ukrainian city of Kupiansk. This was occupied by the Russians for the first 6 months. They lost it in the Kharkiv counteroffensive. And the pre-war population for the city of Kupiansk was about 27,000. Friends of the channel, Serges Samleni, visited the town, and this is what the Russians have done to this Ukrainian city.
справа далі ліс за цими будинками. Вже вона підготувалася.
Nobody can remain there if the Russians shell and bomb the city so much. Russia will be defeated. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.